The little girl didn't run. That was the first thing that should have warned him. She walked out of the dark like she'd rehearsed it, slow, deliberate, barefoot on cracked asphalt at 4 in the morning. She placed a folded piece of paper on the air pump nozzle without looking at the man beside it, without flinching at the motorcycle, without making a single sound. And then she walked back into the shadows between the dumpsters, and the darkness swallowed her whole like she'd never existed at all. Griffin Mercer stood there with a fuel nozzle in his hand and diesel fumes burning his sinuses and stared at that piece of paper for a long time before he picked it up. 7 words. Please help me. I don't know where else to go. Hey, before we go any further, if you've never watched one of these stories before, I need you to understand something. This one is going to stay with you. So get comfortable. Hit that like button if you're already feeling it. Drop your city in the comments. I want to know where in the world you're watching from tonight. And don't you dare click away, because what happens next is the reason this story exists. The Harley's engine ticked as it cooled. That was the only sound left in the world after the girl disappeared. That slow metallic cooling, like the motorcycle itself was trying to calm down. Griffin Mercer stood at pump 3 of the Last Mile Gas and Go on the eastern edge of Delwood, Texas. And he looked at the piece of paper in his hand, and he did not move for 47 seconds. He counted them. Old habit from a life that had required him to count things. Seconds before a breach, heartbeats under fire. Days since he'd last spoken to his daughter. The paper was notebook paper, college-ruled, torn along one edge like it had been ripped out fast. The handwriting was careful. A child's handwriting, but not a young child's. Someone who had learned to make their letters neat because neatness was the one thing they could control. The ink was blue ballpoint, pressed hard into the paper, like the words had required force to get out. Please help me. I don't know where else to go. Griffin folded the paper and put it in the breast pocket of his cut. Then he replaced the fuel nozzle in the pump cradle. Then he stood there in the October dark and looked at the space between the dumpsters where the girl had gone. And he breathed through his nose, slow and even, the way the army had taught him to breathe when the world was falling apart around him, and breathing was the one thing he could still choose to do correctly. He was 51 years old. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and silver everywhere else, and he'd stopped fighting it sometime around the dissolution of his marriage. His face was the kind of face that made convenience store clerks nervous. Not because of any single feature, but because of the sum of them. The way they'd been arranged by weather and war, and years of sleeping in places that weren't beds. He had a scar along his left jaw that he never explained, and a tattoo on his right forearm that he always covered with his sleeve in restaurants. Not out of shame, but out of consideration for people who were trying to eat. He was not a man anyone would call soft. He was also not a man who could leave. He'd known that the moment he'd seen her face, just for a second, just in the sidelight of the pump's fluorescent flicker, and recognized in it something he hadn't seen in years. Something he used to see every morning when his daughter was small and the world hadn't yet taught her to be afraid of it. An openness. A terrible, undefended openness that the world was going to close eventually, one way or another, and the only question was, who did the closing and how? Griffin walked to the space between the dumpsters. She wasn't there. There was a blue backpack, small, the kind designed for elementary school, sitting against the brick wall of the gas station's exterior. One strap was broken and repaired with duct tape. There was a purple keychain shaped like a butterfly attached to the zipper pull. The backpack had been placed there deliberately, not dropped, not abandoned, placed, with intention, in the spot most sheltered from wind and visibility. Someone small and careful had put it there and left it and trusted that the right person would find it. Griffin crouched. He was not going to open the backpack. He was very clear with himself about that. The backpack was a child's private property, and he was not going to violate that. He was just going to look at it. He was going to note that it existed and that it had been placed here intentionally, and that a child who placed her backpack somewhere intentionally before approaching a stranger with a handwritten note was a child who was operating on some kind of plan, however desperate. He stood back up. He looked out at the highway. Route 84, empty at this hour, just the yellow center line disappearing into the flat dark of the Texas plains in both directions. Nobody. Nothing. A coyote somewhere far to the west doing something lonely. He went inside the gas station. The man behind the counter was in his 60s, wearing a vest over a thermal shirt, watching a small television mounted in the corner at a volume low enough to be plausibly deniable. He looked at Griffin the way everyone in Delwood looked at Griffin, with a specific kind of regional suspicion that was less about Griffin personally and more about the cut on his back and the motorcycle outside, and the general implication that he belonged to a world this town had decided it wanted no part of. "Kid," Griffin said, "little girl, maybe 8, 9, barefoot. You see her come through here?" The man looked at him. "No." The word was too fast. Griffin had been around liars long enough to recognize the particular velocity of a no that didn't require any thought because the thought had been prepared in advance. "She's a child," Griffin said. "Barefoot. It's 40 degrees. "I told you, haven't seen any kid." Griffin held his gaze for 3 seconds. The man held it back, but his right hand moved slightly toward the counter's edge, toward whatever he kept under there for situations he didn't like. Griffin looked at the hand. The man looked at Griffin, looking at the hand. "Coffee," Griffin said. He paid for the coffee and a prepackaged ham sandwich he didn't want, and walked back outside. He sat on his bike and drank the coffee and ate half the sandwich and looked at the backpack. He drank the rest of the coffee. Then he took his phone out and sent a text to a number he hadn't used in 6 days. "You awake?" 3 minutes passed. Then, "When am I not? What happened?" It wasn't a question. Ronan Vale had known Griffin Mercer for 22 years, and in that time had developed an intuitive system for parsing Griffin's texts that involved recognizing that Griffin only sent late-night messages when something had already happened, not when something might. Griffin took a picture of the note he'd received and sent it. Another pause. "Where are you?" "Last mile on 84, east side of Delwood. Don't move." Griffin put the phone in his jacket pocket. He sat on his bike. The engine was cold now, fully cold, and the night was very quiet, and he looked at the backpack against the wall and thought about a girl who knew to leave her bag somewhere safe before approaching a stranger, which meant she'd been taught to be careful, or she'd learned it herself. And neither of those possibilities sat easily in his chest. He thought about his daughter. He stopped thinking about his daughter. He refocused on the backpack. He was still sitting there 35 minutes later when headlights appeared from the west. Not one set but 3. And not car headlights, but the single-eye beams of motorcycles running together, close, the sound building up from a distant rumble into something you felt in the base of your sternum before you heard it properly. 3 bikes. He recognized Ronan's Road King by its sound before he could make out the shape of it, the way you recognize the voices of people you'd spent enough time with in enough bad situations to know the particular character of everything about them. Ronan Vale was 56 years old and moved like he was 56 years old and had spent 20 years before that doing things that 56-year-old bodies remembered whether they wanted to or not. He was not a large man, but he occupied space in a way that made large rooms feel smaller. His hair was pulled back. His cut was patched with 20 years of Iron Verdict insignia, the kind of cut that had been washed and reworn and washed again so many times it had become part of the man rather than something worn by him. He parked. The other 2 bikes parked. Decker and Priest, 2 of the club's senior road members, both of them reading the situation before their boots hit the asphalt, both of them moving immediately to positions that casually enclosed the area without looking like they were doing it. That was something you either learned or you didn't, and these men had learned it a long time ago. Ronan walked to Griffin. He looked at the backpack. He looked at the gas station. He looked at Griffin. "Tell me," he said. Griffin told him. Concise, sequential, no editorializing. The girl, the note. The gas station attendant's reaction. The backpack. Ronan listened without interrupting, which was something Griffin had always valued about him. The capacity to simply receive information without the need to shape it while it was still arriving. When Griffin finished, Ronan was quiet for a moment. "Show me the note again." Griffin handed it to him. Ronan read it twice. He held it under his phone light and looked at the handwriting for a long moment, and something moved across his face that wasn't easy to name. Not sentiment exactly, but something adjacent to it, Something that came from a specific place and a person who had seen enough of the world to know exactly what kind of desperation produced this kind of handwriting in this kind of child. "She's still close," Ronan said. It wasn't a question. "I think so." Ronan folded the note carefully and handed it back. He turned to Decker and Priest and spoke to them quietly. They nodded and separated, moving in opposite directions along the building's exterior, unhurried, checking the perimeter the way men do when checking the perimeter is something they've done enough times that it doesn't require discussion. Ronan looked at the gas station door. "I'm going to have a conversation with the man inside," he said. "He's not going to tell you anything." "Maybe not." Ronan's voice was level. "But he's going to know that someone asked, and that changes things, even if nothing else does." He went inside. Griffin waited. He could see through the plate glass window. Ronan approaching the counter, the attendant stiffening, Ronan settling both forearms on the counter and beginning to speak in a way that was entirely calm and entirely serious. Griffin couldn't hear the words. He watched the attendant's face. Whatever Ronan was saying, it was landing. 4 minutes later, Ronan came back out. "She's been in the area 3 days, he said. He's seen her before. He didn't want to say more than that. 3 days, Griffin said. 3 days. They looked at each other in the cold dark. 3 days was a long time for a barefoot child to be circling a gas station in October. 3 days was a story that had more chapters than a single night's note could contain. "We need to find her tonight," Griffin said. "Yes," Ronan said. "We do." They found her an hour and 40 minutes later. She was in a drainage culvert 40 yards behind the gas station's dumpster row, not hiding exactly, but positioned, the way an animal positions itself in the safest available space when all spaces are unsafe. She'd lined the culvert floor with flattened cardboard boxes and covered herself with a mylar emergency blanket that crinkled in the wind, and she'd positioned her body so that her back was to concrete and she could see any approach. The backpack was beside her, the broken strap side against the wall. She was awake when Priest found her. She didn't scream. She pressed herself back against the culvert wall and looked at Priest with eyes that had already processed the worst-case scenario and were operating somewhere beyond fear, somewhere in the territory of pure calculation, assessing threat, assessing options, assessing what was available and what wasn't. Priest was a large man who had spent 30 years learning how to make himself smaller when smallness was needed. He crouched at the culvert entrance, and he did not go in and he did not reach toward her, and he said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "The man you left the note for is right behind me. He's the one on the Harley. He'd like to talk to you if you're willing." She stared at him. "You don't have to come out," Priest said. "You can stay right where you are. He'll come to the edge and talk from there. You call the distance, okay?" Something in her face shifted, infinitesimally, just a fraction. She nodded. Griffin came to the culvert entrance and crouched the way Priest had, and he looked at the girl in the mylar blanket with her backpack pressed against the wall, and he felt something move through him that he didn't try to name or examine because examining it would have required more stillness than he currently had available. "My name's Griffin," he said. "People call me Ghost." She looked at him. 8 years old, he estimated, maybe 9, dark hair tangled from days without brushing, wearing a winter coat that was too large, clearly not hers, probably found somewhere. Her feet were wrapped in what appeared to be multiple layers of grocery bags secured with rubber bands in place of shoes, which was improvised and resourceful and broke something quietly in the region behind his sternum. "You left me a note," he said. She nodded. "I read it," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." The mylar blanket crinkled as she breathed. The wind moved through the culvert. Somewhere beyond the gas station, a truck shifted gears on Route 84. "Are you hurt?" he asked. A pause. Then she shook her head, but her left hand moved toward her right forearm, a small automatic gesture, and then stopped, and she looked at him to see if he'd noticed. He had. He didn't say anything about it. "Are you hungry?" he asked. The question broke something loose in her face, not dramatically. Children who have been hungry for a long time learn to neutralize the reaction to being asked if they're hungry because hope is expensive and they've calculated the cost. But something moved in her eyes that was involuntary, that got past whatever armor she'd assembled over however many days it had been. She nodded. Okay, Griffin said. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to get you something to eat, and I'm going to make sure you're warm. And then, when you're ready, you can tell me as much or as little as you want to tell me. You set the terms. You control the conversation. I'm just going to be here. She looked at him for a long time. It was the look of a child who had been given promises before and had learned to weigh them against everything else available. Tone, posture, eye contact, the presence of other people, the layout of exits. She was performing this calculation openly, without embarrassment, because she had long since stopped having the luxury of pretending she didn't need to do it. Then she reached forward and handed him the mylar blanket and started to crawl out of the culvert. Her name was Maya. She told him that and nothing else for the first hour, and Griffin didn't push for more because Ronan had taken one look at the situation and made the decision that they needed to get off the road before dawn, which meant driving to the chapter's Delwood safe house, a property they maintained for situations that required more than one night's presence in a town, and getting the girl warm and fed before anything else happened. The safe house was a ranch house on 3 acres outside the Delwood town limits, maintained by a club affiliate named Cass, who ran a legitimate welding business out of the adjacent barn and who had, over 12 years of association with the Iron Verdict, learned to ask exactly the right number of questions about unexpected arrivals, which was none. Cass was a woman in her late 40s with forearms that could have belonged to someone twice her size and a manner that suggested she had calibrated her entire personality against the specific frequency of nonsense she was not willing to tolerate. She opened the door at 5:40 in the morning, looked at Maya, looked at Griffin, looked at Ronan, and said, "Kitchen?" and went to start eggs. Maya sat at the kitchen table in Cass's oversized flannel shirt, her original coat draped over the chair back, her feet in 2 pairs of Cass's wool socks, and she ate scrambled eggs and toast with the focused efficiency of someone who had been operating on rationed calories and knew not to waste the opportunity. She didn't speak during the meal. Nobody pushed her to. Griffin sat across from her and drank coffee and watched her without appearing to watch her, cataloging details the way old training made him catalog them. Not from suspicion, but from habit, and because details were information. And information was the difference between understanding a situation and reacting to one. The coat was adult size, men's, no patches or branding that would identify it. The grocery bag shoes were gone now. Cass had found an old pair of sneakers that were too large, but better. But the rubber bands that had held them in place had left faint red indentations around her ankles. The backpack, which she'd kept within reach through the entire journey and now sat on the chair beside her, appeared to contain at least some clothing and possibly a book. She'd eaten everything on her plate. She was left-handed. She used her left arm more fluidly than her right and kept her right forearm angled slightly away from the table's edge. When she finished eating, she looked up and found Griffin watching. She didn't look away. "You saw," she said. Her voice was the first surprise, clear, steady, older than her face, the voice of a child who had learned to speak carefully because words had consequences. "Saw what?" Griffin said. "My arm." A beat. "I noticed you moved it," Griffin said. "I didn't look." She considered this. Then she pushed up the sleeve of Cass's flannel shirt. Griffin kept his face neutral. Years of practice made it possible, though what he was looking at made it harder than most things he'd had to stay neutral about. The bruising was significant and patterned, not the random irregular bruising of falls and childhood clumsiness, but the specific shape of something deliberate, something applied with force to a stationary target. Some of it was recent, some of it wasn't. "How long?" he said. "A while," she said. "Who?" It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even quite a question. It was an invitation, and she received it as one, and she pulled the sleeve back down, and she looked at the table for a moment, and then she said, "My uncle." The kitchen was very quiet. Cass, at the counter, had stopped moving. Ronan, in the doorway, had gone still. Griffin looked at the table, at his coffee cup, at his hands, which he kept flat and open on the table so she could see them. "Where are your parents?" Griffin asked. "Mom died 2 years ago. Car accident." Her voice was precise about this. She'd reported this fact many times, had smoothed it into something deliverable. "I don't know my dad. I went to live with Uncle Dale after." "Does Uncle Dale know where you are?" She looked at him. I don't care, she said. It was the first entirely uncareful thing she'd said. It came out with the compressed force of something that had been held under pressure, and in its wake she looked briefly startled, like she'd surprised herself. Okay, Griffin said quietly. I called 911, she said then. Last month. The lady was nice, but then she said they'd have to send someone to investigate, and I'd need to go stay somewhere temporary, and I didn't. She stopped, reorganized. I'd heard about kids who went somewhere temporary. I didn't want to go somewhere temporary. Griffin absorbed this. You called, he said, and they said they'd have to investigate. They came to the house. Uncle Dale talked to them. He said I fell off my bike. She paused. I don't have a bike. The room was very quiet. Did the officer come in? Griffin asked. Look around? He came in the living room. Uncle Dale offered him coffee. And the officer left. She nodded. Yes, she said. He left. Griffin looked at his hands on the table. He thought about what it cost a child to make a phone call asking for help. The building of nerve, the decision to trust, the explanation to a stranger of something that was both shameful and terrifying, and then the arrival of official vehicles and official questions and the neighbors' curtains moving, and the conversation between two adults about a child while the child stood in the room, and then the departure of the official vehicle and the door closing and the sound of her uncle's footsteps. He thought about what that child had learned from that sequence of events. He thought about the note she'd left on the air pump. I don't know where else to go, not, no one will help me, but I don't know where else to go, which implied she hadn't given up on the category of help, only exhausted the available addresses. The note, Griffin said. Why me specifically? She looked at the table. Something shifted in the way she was holding herself. You were sitting outside for a long time, she said. On your motorcycle. You weren't... She searched for the word. You weren't nervous. Most people who stop at that gas station late at night are nervous. You weren't. He waited. And you ate your sandwich, she said. He blinked. What? The sandwich. The prepackaged ones in there are terrible. Everyone knows that. You ate it like it was fine, like you've eaten worse and you didn't need things to be good. You just needed them to be enough. She looked up at him. I thought that was maybe the right kind of person. Griffin Mercer sat across from a 9-year-old girl in a ranch house kitchen in the dark before dawn, and he thought about a prepackaged ham sandwich, and he had absolutely nothing to say. Ronan spoke from the doorway. Maya, he said, can you tell us what town you're from, where Dale lives? She gave them an address. Delwood proper, a neighborhood Griffin knew by sight, working class, chain-link fences, trucks and driveways, the kind of neighborhood that minded its own business, partly out of culture and partly because minding your own business was how you stayed out of other people's. He doesn't know I'm gone, she said. Not yet. He works nights. He won't be home until 6. Ronan looked at Griffin, a particular look, the kind that meant the clock is already running. Okay, Ronan said. He came into the kitchen and pulled out a chair and sat down. He was the club president, and he had a manner in these moments that was neither warm nor cold, but something else. Something that communicated fundamental seriousness without weight, without imposition. Maya, I need you to listen to me for a minute. Can you do that? She looked at him. We're going to help you, Ronan said, but helping you correctly is going to take longer than one night, and it's going to require that we do things carefully and in the right order. Do you understand what I mean when I say that? She thought about it. You mean you can't just take me somewhere, she said, because then you'd be the ones in trouble. We mean we want to do this in a way that actually protects you, Ronan said. Not just tonight, for real. She looked at him. She looked at Griffin. She looked at her sleeve where her forearm was covered. Okay, she said. She said it like someone who had been given better options and worse options and had long since learned to recognize the difference, even when better still required waiting. Okay. Cass put more toast on the table without comment. The sun came up over Delwood, Texas without ceremony. Just a gray lightning of the eastern horizon, the sky bleeding from black to charcoal to the color of old tin, the flat planes revealing themselves in gradations like a photograph developing in slow motion. The safe house's kitchen window faced east, and the light came in and landed on the kitchen table and on the half-eaten toast and on Maya's hands, which she'd folded in front of her. She'd fallen asleep in the chair. Not dramatically, not a sudden collapse, but the gradual surrender of a body that had been running on adrenaline and will for days, and had finally calculated that this room was safer than the alternatives. Her head had tilted onto her shoulder. Her breathing had slowed and deepened. Her hands, folded on the table, relaxed one finger at a time. Griffin watched her sleep. He had daughters. One daughter, Ellie, who was 23 years old and lived in Portland and had not returned his last 4 calls, and had sent him a text on his birthday that said, "Happy birthday," with no punctuation and no follow-up, and who he had failed in ways that were both specific and numerous, and that he had cataloged many times in the particular kind of self-inventory that happened between 2 and 4 in the morning on the road, which was when the bike's engine was too loud to hear anything but too mechanical to be company. He had failed Ellie not through dramatic betrayal, but through the slower and less cinematically satisfying mechanism of absence. He had been present in the body and gone in every other way that mattered, and then eventually gone in the body too, because that was what happened when a man fled himself. He ended up fleeing everyone attached to himself, in expanding circles, until he was riding Highway 84 at 4 in the morning, stopping for diesel at places called Last Mile. He looked at Maya's folded hands. He did not think of her as a surrogate or a symbol or an opportunity for redemption. He was too old for that kind of thinking, and it was too convenient, and he distrusted it the way he distrusted all convenient things. She was a child named Maya who had been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect her and had exhausted every official avenue available to her, and had constructed a desperate plan and executed it with the limited resources available to her, and happened to choose him as the recipient. She wasn't a second chance. She was her own situation. He just happened to be the man who'd stopped for fuel at the wrong moment, or the right one, depending on what you believed about moments. He went to find Ronan. Ronan was outside with Decker, standing by the bikes, speaking quietly. The morning air was sharp and smelled of frost and dry grass. Griffin pulled his cut tighter and came to stand beside them. "I need to know what we're actually dealing with," he said. "So do I," Ronan said. "Before we do anything formal, I want someone to look at the address she gave us. Just look. Passive observation. No engagement." "Priest can do it," Decker said. "I want church on it too. Both of them." Ronan looked at Griffin. "I also want a conversation with someone who knows this town better than we do. There's a woman. I've dealt with her before. She runs a community organization out of a church hall on the south side. Ellen Fraser. She's been in Delwood 20 years. She'll know the family." "And if this is as straightforward as it looks?" Griffin asked. "Then it's as straightforward as it looks," Ronan said. "But straightforward situations don't usually produce children who've been evading a system for weeks." He looked at the morning sky. "Something about this feels like it has more rooms than we can see from the outside." Griffin thought about the gas station attendant's too fast response. He thought about a cop who'd left after coffee. "Yeah," he said. "It does." "Go get some rest," Ronan said. 3 hours. I need you thinking clearly." "I'm fine." "You've been writing since yesterday morning. 3 hours." A pause, measured. "She's safe here. Cass won't let anything happen in that kitchen." Griffin knew this was true. He went inside and lay down on the couch and stared at the ceiling for a while and eventually slept, which was more than he'd expected and less than he needed. When he woke, Priest was back. He was sitting at this kitchen table across from Ronan, and Maya was not in the room. And the expression on Priest's face was the specific expression of a man delivering information he would have preferred not to have gathered. "The house is a mess," Priest said. "Not dirty. Mess. Like things have been thrown. 2 windows are covered from the inside with cardboard. There's a dog kennel on the back porch. I don't think the dog lives in the kennel, and there's a lock on the outside of what I'm estimating is a bedroom door." The room held its silence. "The uncle?" Griffin said. "Dale Hartwell, 44. Works night shift at the water treatment facility outside town. 4 prior incidents logged with Delwood PD. 2 noise complaints, One domestic disturbance call that was logged as resolved on scene, one DUI that was eventually dismissed. Priest looked at his notes. The domestic disturbance call was 14 months ago. The officer who responded was the same one who came to the house last month. Another silence. Same officer, Ronan said. Same officer. And his name? Priest said the name. Ronan wrote it in his notebook and closed the notebook. Where's Maya? Griffin asked. Back bedroom with Cass, Priest said. Cass found some art supplies. They're drawing something. Griffin absorbed this. Then he walked down the hall to the back bedroom and looked through the partially open door. Maya was seated on the bed with a large pad of paper, drawing. Cass sat beside her, their shoulders almost touching, looking at what Maya was drawing. Neither of them spoke. The morning light came through the window and made them look for a moment like something from a time before complication. Maya was drawing a motorcycle. She'd gotten the proportions approximately right, the low center of gravity, the wide handlebars, the bulk of the engine. It wasn't skilled drawing, but it was careful drawing, the kind that came from looking at something closely enough to want to get it right. She'd drawn a small figure beside it, tall, gray at the temples. Griffin stepped back from the doorway before she could see him. He stood in the hallway of the safe house and looked at nothing for a moment and felt something move through his chest that he could not name and did not try to. Then he went back to the kitchen and got coffee and sat down with Ronan and Decker and Priest, and they began to talk carefully about what happened next. About the right way to do this, the legal way, the documented way, the way that would actually protect her rather than simply move her from one danger to another. About who to call and in what order. About what documentation they needed to assemble. About the locked door on the outside of a bedroom and the officer who had come to the house and left after coffee and the slow, deliberate care required to dismantle a situation that had been sustained, apparently, by exactly the kind of invisible collusion between ordinary men that made official systems feel to children like enemies. Outside, the Texas morning got colder. The frost was still on the grass when Ronan's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something changed in his face, just slightly, just enough for Griffin to notice, which meant it was significant, because Ronan Vale did not allow significant things to show on his face without choosing to allow them. Who is it? Griffin said. Ronan looked up from the phone. Ellen Fraser, he said, the community organizer. You didn't call her yet. No, Ronan said. I didn't. He looked at the phone screen again. She called me. The kitchen was very quiet. The phone rang a third time and Ronan answered it, and his face went entirely still in the way it only went still when what he was hearing was worse than what he'd expected. And when he ended the call, he sat for a moment without moving. Then he looked at Griffin. Maya's not the only child, Ronan said. The words landed in the kitchen like something physical. Ellen Fraser has been tracking it for 8 months, Ronan continued. 3 children. 3 different situations, 3 different adults who are supposed to be responsible for them. She went to the county social services office twice. She went to the sheriff's department once. He paused. Each time, it went nowhere. Griffin set his coffee cup down. And she called you, he said. She'd heard we were in town, Ronan said. Word got around, small town. He looked at Griffin. She'd been trying to figure out who to call for 8 months. And when she heard that bikers were asking questions about a kid in a culvert behind the gas station, she decided we were probably the closest thing to an option she had left. The morning light came through the kitchen window, cold, flat, October light that illuminated without warming. 3 children, Griffin said. At minimum, Ronan said. She said at least 3 that she knew of, which means she suspects more. The silence in the kitchen had a specific texture now, the texture of something that had just gotten significantly larger than it started. Griffin thought about a little girl drawing a motorcycle on a bed in the back room. He thought about a lock on the outside of a bedroom door. He thought about an officer who came to a house and left after coffee. He thought about the speed of a no that had already been prepared. He thought about the note. 7 words on a piece of college-ruled paper. Please help me. I don't know where else to go. She'd chosen him because he'd eaten a terrible sandwich without complaint. Because she'd watched him long enough to decide he was the right kind of person. A child with no institutional faith left had sat in a drainage culvert and assembled a plan and executed it, and it had led here, to this kitchen, to this table, to this conversation about 3 children and an officer who drank coffee, and a community organizer who'd been shouting into walls for 8 months. The question forming in Griffin Mercer's mind was not whether he was going to do something about this. The question was what exactly they were going to find when they started pulling the thread. Because some threads, when you pulled them, just kept coming. And something in his gut, some old, road-worn, war-burned instinct, was telling him that this one went very, very deep. Ellen Fraser arrived at the safe house at 8:47 in the morning, and the first thing Griffin noticed was that she checked the road behind her twice before she got out of the car. Not once. Twice. That told him something. She was in her mid-50s, a black woman with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead like she'd forgotten they were there, wearing a winter coat that had been good quality once and had been worn long enough to arrive somewhere on the other side of good quality. She moved with the slightly compressed energy of someone who had been operating at sustained urgency for so long that the urgency had become her resting state. She carried a canvas tote bag against her chest with both arms, the way people carried things they weren't going to set down. Ronan met her at the door. They shook hands and she came inside, and she looked around the kitchen at Griffin and Decker and Priest with the frank, appraising look of a woman who had spent 20 years navigating rooms full of men who had more confidence than was warranted by their understanding of the situation, and who had long since developed a reliable method for determining which men were worth her time. She looked at Ronan. "Is the girl here?" she said. "She's resting," Ronan said. "Good. She needs it." Ellen set the tote bag on the kitchen table. It landed with a weight that suggested paper. A lot of paper. "Before I show you what I have, I need to know who else knows you're here." "Our club. A few trusted people." "Names?" Ronan told her. She processed this. Then she looked at Griffin specifically, with the focused attention of someone who had done some processing before arriving. "You're the one she left the note for," Ellen said. "Yes," Griffin said. She held his gaze for a moment. Not challenging, assessing. The way you looked at a load-bearing wall when you were deciding whether to trust the structure. "She watched you for 2 nights before she approached you," Ellen said. Something went quiet in Griffin's chest. 2 nights, he said. "I've seen her at that gas station before. I didn't know why she was there, and I thought maybe she was trying to stay warm. Now I think she was looking for the right person." Ellen looked down at the tote bag. "She's very careful, very patient." A pause. "Children who are very patient have usually learned that impatience gets them hurt." The kitchen held that. Ellen opened the tote bag and began laying documents on the table. Not dramatically, methodically, the way someone organized who has prepared for a presentation that they've had to postpone too many times. Printed emails. Handwritten notes. Photographs, some taken from a distance with a long lens. Several manila folders with dates written on the tabs in marker. 8 months ago, she said, a woman named Carla Hutchins came to my community center. Her granddaughter Bree was 6 years old and living with Carla's son. Carla had concerns, specific documented concerns. She'd taken photographs. She'd kept a journal. She came to me because she'd already been to county social services and they told her a caseworker would be assigned within 30 days and gave her a form number. "Did a caseworker get assigned?" Ronan asked. "A caseworker made 2 phone calls," Ellen said. One to the father, one follow-up 2 weeks later, also to the father. Both calls were logged as completed. The case was marked as monitored. "And Bree?" Ellen looked at the photographs on the table. "Bree is 7 now. She's still in the same home." Griffin looked at the photographs. He looked at them for a moment and then looked away. Not because he was squeamish, but because looking at them while keeping his expression neutral required more internal management than he wanted to spend in front of witnesses. "You said 3 children," Ronan said. 3 that I can document," Ellen said. "Bree Hutchins, a boy named Caleb Marsh, 9 years old, living with a family friend of his late mother's, a man named Voss. And Maya." She looked up. "Maya Hartwell I've been watching for 4 months. I wasn't able to get close enough to her to have a real conversation. She doesn't trust adults. She's been operating essentially alone. The uncle, Griffin said. Dale Hartwell. Dale Hartwell, Ellen confirmed, who works nights at the water treatment facility, who has been in this town for 7 years, who is, she paused, on the volunteer board of the Delwood Youth Athletics Association. The room processed this. He works with children, Decker said. It wasn't a question. He helps organize the Summer League registration drives, Ellen said. He drives the van on field trip days twice a year. Her voice was controlled, but beneath the control was something that had been burning for a long time, and was using the control as fuel rather than suppression. He is considered, by people who don't know what I know, to be a community-minded individual. Griffin put his hands flat on the table. And the other one, he said, Voss. Raymond Voss, 49. He coaches one of the youth baseball teams. She looked at Griffin. He and Dale Hartwell know each other. They've known each other for at least 4 years. I have photographs of them together at 3 separate youth athletics events. Boaz. The weight of this settled into the kitchen like cold air through a gap in the wall. Slow, pervasive, the kind of cold that got into everything before you noticed it was there. You think this is coordinated, Ronan said. I think 2 men in the same social network in the same small town are in similar situations with children in their care, and the local official response to concerns about both of them has been, she looked at her documents, remarkably consistent in its ineffectiveness. She looked up. Draw your own conclusions. Ronan drew his. Griffin could see it in the set of Ronan's jaw. The specific configuration that meant he was recalculating, taking a situation he'd understood to have a certain perimeter and adjusting for the fact that the perimeter was larger. This was one of Ronan Vale's core competencies as a leader, the ability to absorb an expansion of a problem without flinching in a way that communicated anything to the people who needed him not to flinch. He was doing it now, but Griffin knew him well enough to see the adjustment happening. The officer, Griffin said, the one who responded to Maya's call and came to the house. Ellen looked at him. What about him, she said, but the question was hollow. She already knew what he was about to say. He's the same officer who responded to a domestic disturbance call at Dale Hartwell's house 14 months ago, Griffin said. I want to know if he's also the officer who responded to anything involving Voss. Ellen reached into the tote bag without looking and produced a single sheet of paper, which she placed in front of Griffin. It was a log, handwritten, dates in the left margin, notes in the right. At the top she'd written a name, Officer T. Breck. Griffin scanned it. 3 entries for Hartwell, 2 for Voss. 1 for a third address he didn't recognize. The third address, he said. That's Bree Hutchins's father, Ellen said. Officer Breck was dispatched there on a welfare check 11 months ago. He stayed for 12 minutes. 12 minutes. And the case for Bree was marked as monitored, Griffin said. Yes, Ellen said. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the ones that had come before it. This one had architecture. It had walls and a ceiling and load-bearing elements. It was the silence of people sitting inside a structure they just realized was larger than any of them had individually estimated. Ronan spoke first. Ellen, he said, who else have you shared this with? My state representative's office, she said. 8 weeks ago. I was told someone would review my materials. She picked up a printed email and put it down again. I received an automated confirmation, nothing since. Any journalists? I spoke with a reporter at the Delwood Courier 6 months ago. She was interested. The story didn't run. Ellen said this without particular bitterness, or rather with the particular flatness of a bitterness that had moved beyond its own heat. I spoke with someone at a regional television station 3 months ago, also interested, also nothing. Why nothing? Priest said. Ellen looked at him. Because Delwood is a small town, she said, and small towns have social physics. People know each other. People are related to each other. People have been to each other's cookouts and youth league games and holiday parties. And when someone like me comes forward with documentation suggesting that something is very wrong, the first instinct of a lot of people is not to investigate what I'm claiming. It's to investigate why I might be making it up. She said this with the absolute steadiness of someone who had moved through that particular maze and come out the other side without losing her footing, though not without losing things. "Nobody said you were making it up," Ronan said. "Nobody said I wasn't," Ellen said, which is its own answer. Decker shifted in his chair. Priest was looking at the documents on the table with the focused stillness of a man doing internal math. Griffin was looking at the name Ellen had written at the top of her log. Officer T. Breck. He was building a picture. He'd built pictures before, in different contexts, for different purposes, in situations where the failure to build the picture correctly had consequences that the building of a picture in a safe house kitchen did not technically have. But the mechanics were the same: data points, relationships. The shape that emerged when you connected them with lines and stood back and looked at what you'd drawn. What he was drawing now had a shape he didn't like. "I need to ask you something," Griffin said to Ellen, "and I need you to answer it honestly, even if the honest answer is uncomfortable." She looked at him without expression. "Is there anything about your relationship with these families or your history in this town that someone could use to undermine your credibility?" He held her gaze. "I'm not asking because I doubt you. I'm asking because if we take this forward and it gets adversarial, someone is going to look for that lever. I need to know if it exists before they find it." The kitchen was quiet. Ellen Fraser looked at Griffin Mercer for a long moment. She looked at him the way someone looked at a question that deserved a real answer, which required locating the real answer before delivering it, which took a moment. 15 years ago, she said, I was involved in a public dispute with the Delwood City Council over zoning changes that affected the community center's lease. It got heated. There was a confrontation at a council meeting that was reported in the Courier. I raised my voice. She paused. I was described in the article as disruptive. "That's what they have?" Decker said. "That's what they've used," Ellen said. "Every time I've brought a complaint to an official body in this town since then, someone has mentioned the council meeting, usually within the first 10 minutes. Griffin nodded. He filed it. "Anything else?" he asked. She looked at him. "My son had a drug problem," she said, "between the ages of 19 and 23. He's been clean for 11 years. He's a physical therapist in Austin." A beat. Someone mentioned it to the television reporter. More quiet. "Okay," Griffin said. "Is that going to be a problem?" Ellen asked. "It's going to be something they try to use," Griffin said. "Whether it's a problem depends on how we position everything going into it." He looked at Ronan. "We need to talk about documentation, what we do with what she has and what we build on top of it." Ronan nodded slowly. "Before that," Ronan said, "I want to talk about Maya." Everyone looked at him. Because Maya is in the back room right now, and by this time of morning, her uncle is home from his shift, and by noon he's going to know she's gone. And by tonight he's going to have filed something or called someone or done whatever a man in his position does when the primary mechanism of his control goes missing. Ronan looked at Griffin. "We have a time problem." Griffin had been aware of the time problem since Priest had told them about the lock on the outside of the bedroom door. He'd been sitting with it the way he sat with tactical problems. Not solving it in real time, but letting it develop in the back of his processing, letting the edges of it clarify. "She needs to be with someone official," he said. "Someone she can't be taken back from." "Which means we have to find the official channel that actually works," Ronan said. "Which is the thing that hasn't worked for anyone in this room so far." "State level," Ellen said. "Not county. The county apparatus is the problem. If we go to the State Child Protective Services office directly, bypass the county referral process, we take the local filter out of the system." "You've tried that?" Griffin asked. "I've tried the state level with documentation about Bree and Caleb," Ellen said. "I haven't yet had a child willing to talk directly." She looked toward the hallway where the back bedroom was. "Maya being willing to talk changes what the state office receives. It's not just a community advocate's report anymore. It's a child with visible injuries who has given a statement." "It needs to happen today," Ronan said. "Yes," Ellen said. "It does." Griffin pushed back from the table and stood and walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the morning. The frost had almost gone from the grass now. The sun was weak but present, that thin October sun that provided light without meaningful warmth. His bike was in the barn with the others, out of sight from the road. The road itself was empty. A hawk was sitting on the fence post at the property's edge, looking at something in the grass with complete attention. He stood at the window and he thought about the conversation he needed to have with Ronan that he hadn't had yet, the one that wasn't about documentation or official channels or the logistics of today. The one that was about the other thing. He was aware that he was too close to this. He'd been aware of it since he'd looked at the lock on the outside of a bedroom door, described to him by Priest, and felt something move through his system that was not professional and not tactical and was not compatible with making good decisions. He turned back from the window. "I need a minute with Ronan," he said to the room. Decker and Priest understood this without needing it explained. They moved. Decker going outside, Priest to the far end of the hallway, both of them creating space with the practiced naturalness of men who had done this before. Ellen began organizing her documents. "I'll wait in the other room," she said, and went without being asked. Griffin sat back down across from Ronan. Ronan waited. "You know what I'm going to say?" Griffin said. "Yes," Ronan said. "Say it anyway." Ronan was quiet for a moment. He poured more coffee from the pot on the counter, reaching without standing, the way a man in a familiar kitchen reached, and wrapped both hands around the cup. "You want to go to Hartwell's house," Ronan said. Griffin said nothing. "You want to have a conversation with Dale Hartwell," Ronan continued, "that does not involve documentation or official channels or the careful and legally defensible process we've been describing for the last 2 hours." "I didn't say that," Griffin said. "You didn't have to." Griffin looked at his hands on the table. "Tell me it hasn't crossed your mind," he said. "It crossed my mind in the first 20 seconds, Ronan said, "which is exactly why I'm not going anywhere near Dale Hartwell today. Or you." His voice was even. "You hear me?" "I hear you." "No, look at me." Ronan waited until Griffin was looking at him. "We have been at this for a long time. We have not always been perfect about staying on the right side of things, but we have never done anything that put a child in greater danger than she was already in. You go to Hartwell today, he knows she's been found, he knows she's been talking, he starts covering, he calls Voss, he calls Breck, and everything Ellen spent 8 months building gets complicated in ways that might take years to untangle." Griffin looked at him. "I know," he said, "but you still want to go." "Yeah," Griffin said, "I still want to go." Ronan nodded. "I know," he said quietly. "I know you do." A pause. "This is about Ellie," Ronan said. It wasn't a question and it wasn't accusatory. It was just a statement of fact from a man who had known Griffin Mercer for 22 years and had earned the right to say the true thing plainly. "It's about Maya," Griffin said. "It's about both," Ronan said. "That's not a criticism. It's a fact. And it means you need someone watching the distance between those two things." He held Griffin's gaze. "I'm watching it, okay? I'm watching it so you don't have to. That's what this is for." He gestured briefly between them, a small gesture that indicated the 22 years and everything built in them. "You can stay close to this. You should stay close to it, but you don't go anywhere near Hartwell." Griffin sat with this. Then he nodded once. "Okay," he said. "Okay," Ronan said. He drank his coffee. Griffin drank his coffee. Outside, Decker's footsteps crossed the gravel around the barn, slow and deliberate, the sound of a large man choosing not to make noise. "What about the other kids?" Griffin said. "Bree and Caleb." "One at a time," Ronan said. "Maya first, because she's here and she's already in motion. We get her safe and documented and in the right hands today. Then we look at what that movement creates." "And the club?" "I'm calling a meet this afternoon," Ronan said. "Everyone who's in range. I want bodies here, but not for intimidation, not for anything that looks like pressure, just presence. Enough eyes and enough people that things don't happen quietly." He set his coffee down. "And I'm calling some people I know in the Northeast District. There's an advocate organization out of Dallas, a woman named Tran, she does this specifically, children's advocacy at the state level. If I can get her on the phone today, we might have a path." "How many people does she need?" "She needs documentation," Ronan said. Ellen's materials, Maya's statement, photographs of the bruising documented by someone credentialed. Priest knows a nurse practitioner who rides with the Austin chapter. She can be here by tonight if I ask. Griffin thought about Maya in the back room, drawing motorcycles on paper, trusting a kitchen because it was safer than everywhere else she'd been. She's going to be scared, he said, of the process, of talking to more strangers. Yes, Ronan said, she will be. Someone needs to stay with her through it, someone she knows. That'll be you, Ronan said, simply as if it had already been decided, which perhaps it had been. Griffin nodded. He went down the hall to the back bedroom. Maya was awake. She'd moved from the bed to the floor, sitting with her back against the frame with the drawing pad across her knees. Cass had gone. Could hear her in the adjacent room, on the phone, her voice low and businesslike. The morning had advanced enough that the light coming through the window was real light now. Not dawn gray, but actual daylight, the kind that revealed details. The room smelled of paper and the faint cedar of an old dresser in the corner. Maya looked up when Griffin appeared in the doorway. He didn't go in. He leaned against the frame with his arms crossed and looked at her drawing pad and saw that she'd moved on from the motorcycle. She was drawing something else now, a house, but a particular kind of house, with a specific window that she was giving careful attention to. A window with something behind it. He looked at the drawing and understood after a moment what he was seeing. She was drawing the lock on the outside of her bedroom door. She'd drawn it from the inside. From the perspective of someone on the inside of a locked door, looking out through the window at the lock. Hey, he said quietly. She looked up. We're going to make some calls today, he said. Some of them are going to be to people you don't know yet, and some of those people are going to want to talk to you. You get to decide how much you say and when. Nothing happens without you agreeing to it first. She looked at him for a moment. Are you going to leave? She said. No, he said. Promise? He didn't say things he didn't mean, and he knew this was a promise he had to mean completely, because a child who had watched him for 2 nights before trusting him with 7 words was a child who would know, at a level she might not even be able to articulate, whether the promise was real. Promise, he said. She looked back at her drawing. Okay, she said. The morning moved. Ronan made calls. Ellen organized. Griffin sat on the floor outside Maya's door and drank his 3rd coffee of the day and watched the front window and listened to the sound of the safe house operating around him. The specific, purposeful noise of people who know what they're doing when something needs to be done. At 11:15, Decker came in from outside. His face was wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Decker was not a man who wore things dramatically on his face. But Griffin had known him for 14 years, and the wrongness was there in the set of his shoulders and the particular way he moved through the kitchen door, and Griffin was on his feet before Decker had made it 3 steps inside. What? Griffin said. Car, Decker said. Silver sedan. Made a pass at the end of the road about 20 minutes ago. I didn't think much of it. Ranch road, people turn around. But it came back, slow the second time, stopped at the end of the road for maybe 45 seconds. He looked at Griffin, then left. Griffin looked at Ronan. Ronan was already moving, going to the window, angling to see without being visible from outside. Could be nothing, Priest said. Could be, Decker said. What's the property registration on this place? Griffin asked. It was directed at Cass, who had appeared in the kitchen doorway. My welding business, Cass said. Not anything with your club attached to it. Nothing that links. What about Ellen? Ronan said. She checked the road when she arrived. Did she do that because she regularly does it, or because she thought she was being watched? Nobody answered. Griffin went to the back bedroom. Ellen? He said through the adjacent room door. I need you out here. She came out. She read the room in about 4 seconds. What happened? She said. A car made 2 passes on the road outside, Griffin said. Do you think you were followed coming here? Ellen looked at him, and he watched her run the question against everything she knew about her own situation, her own routines, the 8 months of accumulated awareness about what operating in Delwood while building a case against it felt like. I don't know, she said. Have you had any indication that you were being watched? Any cars you've seen repeatedly? Any sense of it? She was quiet for a moment. 3 weeks ago, she said, My office was broken into. The community center. Someone came in through the back window. Nothing was taken. Nothing was obviously disturbed. She paused. My filing cabinet was relocked, but I hadn't left it locked. More quiet. You didn't report this, Ronan said. To who? Ellen said. To Officer Breck? The sound of an engine from outside. Everyone's attention moved simultaneously to the window. The specific reactive attention of people in a room who have just recalibrated their threat assessment and are now operating at a higher alertness. It was Priest coming back on his bike, pulling into the barn. He came in through the kitchen door 30 seconds later. Silver sedan, he said, parked on the county road half a mile east. Someone in the driver's seat hasn't moved. The kitchen gathered itself. They know we're here, Griffin said. Or they know Ellen's here, Ronan said, which was different in its implications and possibly worse because it meant the problem had found them rather than them finding the problem, which changed the sequence of everything they'd been planning. Maya, Griffin said. Right here. Her voice from the hallway. She was standing at the hall entrance in Cass's flannel shirt and the two large sneakers, drawing pad held against her chest, looking at the room with the specific alertness of a child who had spent enough time in situations requiring alertness that the presence of urgent adult conversation in a kitchen immediately recalibrated her posture. She looked at Griffin. We need to move, she said. Not a question. Griffin looked at her, the directness of her, the compressed readiness. Not yet, he said, but maybe. I know the silver car, she said. The room went still. What? Ronan said. The silver car. If it's a silver Camry, two of the door panels don't match. They're a slightly different shade. There's a crack in the windshield, driver's side. She looked at the table, at the floor, at something she was remembering rather than seeing. It parks outside the house sometimes, at night, when Uncle Dale has someone over. Griffin looked at Ronan. Ronan looked at Priest. Go back out, Ronan said to Priest. Get close enough to see the windshield without being seen. Priest left. Maya looked at Griffin. Is it the same car? She asked. We're going to find out, Griffin said. She nodded. She didn't ask more questions. She turned and went back to the bedroom, unhurried, and the drawing pad stayed held against her chest like armor. 2 minutes later, Griffin's phone buzzed. A text from Priest. Cracked windshield. Mismatched panels. Same car. Griffin showed the phone to Ronan, and something in Ronan Vale's face went through several rapid configurations, calculation, reassessment, the arrival at a decision, and then settled into the particular stillness that meant a line had been crossed. Not by them. By someone else. A line that meant this had stopped being a situation they could manage carefully and at their preferred pace, and had become a situation that was managing them. We're past 8 months of careful, Ronan said. Yes, Griffin said. The car outside means someone knows she's been found. It means Hartwell knows, or Breck knows, or both of them know, and they've sent someone to watch what we do next. He looked at the hallway, which means the next thing we do has to be the right thing. No mistakes, no half measures. He turned to Ellen. Can you get Tran on the phone right now? He said. I can try, Ellen said. Don't try, Ronan said. Do it. She was already reaching for her phone. Griffin went to the window and looked out at the road. The frost was completely gone from the grass now. The day was moving forward regardless. The hawk was still on the fence post, still looking at the same patch of ground with the same absolute patience. He thought about a silver car with mismatched panels that parked outside the house when Dale Hartwell had company. He thought about two men who knew each other, who volunteered together, who coached and organized and drove vans, who had, between them, access to enough children and enough official goodwill to have been doing what Ellen suspected they were doing for a very long time without sufficient interference. He thought about a community organizer who'd been shouting into walls for 8 months, and whose filing cabinet had been relocked by someone who'd come through the back window. He thought about an officer who drank coffee and left. He thought about the way a very small and very careful child had sat in a drainage culvert and assembled a plan using the only tools available to her: patience, observation, and the willingness to trust one stranger on the evidence of a prepackaged ham sandwich. The hawk lifted off the fence post and disappeared over the tree line. Griffin's phone buzzed again. Not a text this time. A call. Unknown number. He looked at it for a moment before answering. "Mercer," he said. A pause on the line. Then a voice. Male, middle-aged, local accent, the particular flatness of a man who had decided in advance that this call was a formality. "Mr. Mercer," the voice said. "My name is Breck. I'm a patrol officer with the Delwood Police Department. I understand you may have had some contact with a missing juvenile. I'd like to discuss—" "She's not missing," Griffin said. "She left." Another pause. "There's an adult with custodial rights who's concerned about—" "I'm sure he is," Griffin said. Silence on the line. Not the silence of someone who didn't know what to say. The silence of someone recalibrating. "Mr. Mercer," Breck said, and his voice had changed slightly. The formality's still there, but something underneath it now, something that was not quite a threat, but occupied the same neighborhood. "I think it would be in everyone's best interest if you and I had a conversation in person. This is a family matter. It doesn't need to involve—" "I'm going to stop you there," Griffin said, "because I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it correctly. The child is safe. She has visible injuries that are being documented by a medical professional. She has given a statement that is being forwarded to the State Office of Child Protective Services. Her situation, and the situations of at least 2 other children in this town, are now part of an official state-level inquiry." He paused. "Is there anything else you'd like to discuss?" The silence this time was different. It was the silence of something shifting, of a calculation being revised, of a man on the other end of a call arriving at the recognition that the situation he'd thought he was calling to contain had already gone somewhere his containment could not reach. "Mr. Mercer?" "Good morning, officer," Griffin said, and ended the call. He stood at the window with his phone in his hand and looked at the road. In the kitchen behind him, he could hear Ellen's voice, still on the call with Tran, her voice lifted now, energized, the tone of someone who was finally being heard. Ronan was beside her, speaking in low tones, providing specifics. Cass was moving through the house, doing things that needed doing. Decker and Priest were outside. From the back bedroom, silence, which meant Maya was either asleep or sitting very still, which meant she was sitting very still, which meant she was listening to the sound of the house around her and calculating what it told her about whether she was still safe. Griffin went to the hallway. He stopped outside her door. He said, through the door, "Still here." A pause. Then, "I know," she said. "I can hear your boots." He stood there for a moment. "The car outside," he said. "The people in it, they don't come in here." Another pause. "I know that too," she said. He pressed his back against the hallway wall and slid down it until he was sitting on the floor, his boots flat in front of him, his head back against the plaster. He sat there in the hallway of a safe house in Delwood, Texas, and he listened to the house and the morning and the distant sound of engines somewhere on the county road. His phone buzzed. A text. The unknown number. Breck's number now, identifiable. "You're making a mistake." Griffin looked at the text. He thought about everything that was in motion now, said Tran on the phone with Ellen, the state-level inquiry, the nurse practitioner coming from Austin, the documentation, the photographs, the names of 3 children and 2 men and 1 officer who had drunk coffee and left. He thought about a silver car with mismatched panels sitting half a mile down the road. He thought about the fact that Breck had called him directly, which meant Breck had his number, which meant Hartwell had his number, which meant someone had run his plates in the night and pulled everything attached to them. He thought about what they had now versus what they'd had when he'd picked up that note. He typed back. No. He sent it. He put the phone in his pocket. He sat in the hallway with his boots on the floor and his back against the wall and his eyes on the front of the house, watching the light change on the linoleum as the morning moved toward noon. And in the back bedroom, Maya Hartwell sat on the floor with her drawing pad and drew a door and drew a lock and drew a man sitting on the floor outside it, keeping watch. And in Ellen Fraser's voice from the kitchen, something that had been waiting for 8 months finally began to move. And in the county road outside, A silver car with mismatched panels sat in the pale October sunlight, and the 3 motorcycles in the barn waited like horses before a long ride. It was only the beginning of what this day was going to cost. The call from Tran lasted 41 minutes. Griffin knew this because he counted, the way he counted everything when his hands had nothing to do. Sitting in the hallway outside Maya's door, listening to Ellen's voice rise and fall through the kitchen wall, parsing the rhythm of it without the words. The voice of someone building a case in real time, delivering documentation piece by piece, answering questions with the compressed precision of a person who had rehearsed this conversation in their head so many times that performing it live felt like finally being allowed to run. When Ellen came out of the kitchen, her face was different. Not relieved, not victorious. Something more complicated than either. The face of someone who had just gotten something they'd worked for long enough that getting it didn't feel the way they'd imagined it would. "She's moving on it today," Ellen said. "State level. She's filing an emergency welfare inquiry for Maya specifically. That triggers a mandatory response timeline. They have to move within 24 hours. She looked at Griffin. She also said, she stopped. "What?" Griffin said. "She said she'd been watching this county for 6 months. Ellen held his gaze. She already had a file on Officer Breck, not just complaints, patterns, multiple counties. Griffin processed this. "He's done this before," he said. "Not just here." "Not just here," Ellen said. The hallway was very quiet. "How many counties?" Griffin asked. Ellen looked at him. "She wouldn't say yet," Ellen said. "She said we should focus on what we can document today and let her office handle the wider picture." A pause. "She said it like someone who needed me to not ask that question again for a few hours." Griffin stood up from the floor. He went to find Ronan. Ronan was in the barn with Decker, standing between 2 of the bikes, speaking quietly. The barn smelled of oil and dry hay and cold concrete, the particular combination of smells that Griffin associated with this kind of meeting, the kind that happened in structures adjacent to the main one, away from civilians and complexity, where things could be said plainly. He told them what Ellen had said. Ronan listened. Decker listened. Neither of them spoke until he'd finished. Then Decker said, "Multiple counties." "That's what she said." Decker looked at his boots. He was a large man, Decker. Not heavy, but built in the way that suggested specific use over time, the way old tools were built. He had a stillness to him that was not passive. It was the stillness of something with a great deal of tension in it, held very carefully. "That changes the size of this," he said. "Yes," Griffin said. Ronan was looking at the barn door, at the rectangle of pale daylight beyond it, at the road visible in the distance. His hands were in his jacket pockets. His jaw was doing the thing it did when he was working through something that required more than one level of consideration simultaneously. "The car's still out there," Decker said. "I know," Ronan said. "We've been here all morning. If they wanted to do something, they'd have done something." "They're watching what we do," Ronan said, "which means they're not sure what they have yet. They know the girl is here. They know we made calls. They don't know what those calls produced." He turned from the door. "The moment they know a state inquiry has been filed, the dynamic changes." "How fast can Breck move?" Griffin asked. "Depends on who he's talking to," Ronan said. "If it's just him and Hartwell, not fast. If there are more people in this—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Griffin's phone buzzed. He looked at it. Not Breck this time. A number he recognized. Church, one of the club's Delwood area members who Ronan had dispatched earlier for background work. He answered. "Talk," he said. Church's voice was low and had a quality of controlled urgency that Griffin recognized. "I've been at the county clerk's office, property records. You told me to look at connections between Hartwell and Voss." "Yeah." They co-signed a lease on a storage facility off Route 19, Industrial Park, 3 years ago. The lease is still active. A pause. "I also found something else. The property next door to the storage facility, commercial lot listed as vacant. The listed owner is a shell company registered in Delaware. I've seen that registration format before. It's the same format as 2 other properties in town." "What other properties?" One is the building that houses the Youth Athletics Association offices, Church said. The other is a property on the east side that's listed as a private residence. The registered occupant, another pause, the pause of someone confirming what they're about to say, is Breck, Thomas Breck. The barn went very quiet. Not in Griffin's ears. His ears were still processing ambient sound. The wind against the barn wall, a vehicle somewhere on the county road, Decker's breathing. But the barn went quiet in the way that a space went quiet when everyone in it simultaneously stopped contributing to the noise because what they were hearing required all available processing. All three owned by the same shell company, Griffin said. Same registration format. Not confirmed same entity yet, but yeah. Griffin looked at Ronan. Send me everything. Photos, registration numbers, dates, everything. Already sending, Church said, and the line went dead. Griffin held the phone while Church's documents came through, the ping of each attachment arriving punctuating the barn's silence. He looked at the images as they loaded. Lease documents, property records, the Delaware registration numbers, long strings of digits and letters that meant nothing individually and something very specific in combination. He handed the phone to Ronan. Ronan looked at it for a long time. He scrolled. He looked at Decker. He looked at Griffin. They own the building where the Youth Athletics office operates, Ronan said. Yes, Griffin said, through a shell company. Yes. Which means the organization that provides Hartwell and Voss access to children is housed in a building they control, Griffin said, through something designed not to look like they control it. Decker made a sound that was not quite a word. Ronan handed the phone back. He looked at the barn door again, at the pale daylight. His hands were in his pockets, and his face had settled into that particular absolute stillness, and Griffin watched him arrive at something. We need to call Tran back, Ronan said, right now, before she files the emergency inquiry. She needs this. If she's already filed, then we add to it. But if she hasn't, Ronan was already moving toward the barn door. This isn't just Breck. This isn't even just Hartwell and Voss. This is infrastructure. This was built. He stopped at the doorway. Someone built this. And that means it's been running longer than 8 months. It's been running longer than Ellen's been watching it. The three of them stood in the barn doorway for a moment, looking at the property, at the road, at the silver car visible as a small shape in the distance against the flat gray of the October sky. Then something changed. The silver car was moving, not toward them, away, pulling out onto the county road and heading east toward town. Griffin watched it go, and the watching had a specific feeling to it. Not relief, which would have been the obvious feeling, but the opposite. The car leaving was not a reduction of threat. It was a change in its nature. Why would they leave now? Decker said. Nobody answered. Griffin was already going back to the house. He came through the kitchen door and Cass was standing at the counter with her phone in her hand and an expression that was trying to be neutral and not succeeding. What? Griffin said. Someone called the front number, Cass said. The welding business line. Who? She looked at him. They said they were calling about the Hartwell girl, she said. They knew she was here, Griffin. They said her by name. Said she was here. What did they want? They said... Cass stopped. She looked at the phone in her hand. They said to tell the bikers that they had 45 minutes to put her in a car and drive her back to her uncle's house. They said after 45 minutes, it would become a law enforcement matter and the bikers would be facing kidnapping charges. The word landed in the kitchen the way words landed when they were specifically chosen for their weight. Griffin stood very still. Kidnapping. It was the correct lever. Not because it was true. The child had come to them. She was here voluntarily. She had injuries documented by multiple witnesses and a nurse practitioner arriving from Austin. But because the process of defending against it would take time, it would take lawyers and statements and the specific bureaucratic machinery of accusation and defense. It would occupy the next 12 to 48 hours with something other than what they needed those hours for. And in those hours, things could move. Records could be corrected. Narratives could be established. A child with injuries could find herself returned to a home while the adults around her argued about the legal definition of voluntary. This was not a threat. This was a move. Griffin went to find Ronan. He found him in the living room already on the phone with Tran. He stood in the doorway and waited, watching Ronan's face, until Ronan looked at him, and Griffin held up the phone, showing Cass's incoming call log, and mouthed, "Kidnapping threat." Something moved in Ronan's face. He said into his phone, "I need to add something." And he looked at Griffin. "Tell me." Griffin told him, fast, sequential, no editorializing. Ronan relayed it to Tron. There was a pause on the line during which Ronan's expression went through several things and emerged somewhere harder. "She says file everything now," Ronan said. "She's filing the emergency inquiry in the next 10 minutes. The kidnapping claim works against them, not us. It establishes that they know where Maya is, which establishes that Hartwell is in active contact with someone who has that information, which is itself a data point." He paused. "She also says we need a lawyer on site within the hour." "Who?" Griffin said. "She has someone," Ronan said. "She's sending him." Griffin nodded. He turned. He almost walked into Priest. Priest was standing in the hallway entrance with his phone in his hand, and his face was doing something Griffin had only seen it do twice in 14 years. A specific kind of contained alarm that on any other face would have been panic, and on Priest's face was just a slight widening around the eyes and a compression of the mouth. "What?" Griffin said. Priest looked at Ronan, then at Griffin. "Church called back," Priest said. "I talked to Church 20 minutes ago." "He called back," Priest said. Something else came up in the property records. He looked at the phone in his hand. The shell company, the one that owns the youth athletics building and Breck's house and the storage facility lot. He paused. Church traced the registration through 3 layers of holding companies. It took him a while. "And," Griffin said. Priest looked at him. "The original registration," Priest said carefully, "goes back 11 years. The name's on the original filing." He stopped. "Priest," Griffin said. "One of the names is Hartwell," Priest said. "Not Dale Hartwell. A Marcus Hartwell." He looked at Griffin steadily. "Marcus Hartwell is Dale Hartwell's older brother. And 11 years ago, Marcus Hartwell was a county commissioner." The living room was very, very quiet. "Was," Ronan said. "He left office 8 years ago," Priest said. "He moved out of the county, but the company never dissolved. The registrations rolled over every 2 years on schedule." He paused. "The last rollover was 14 months ago." 14 months ago. The same time frame as the domestic disturbance call at Dale Hartwell's house that had been logged as resolved on scene. Griffin looked at Ronan. Ronan looked at him. Neither of them said what they were both calculating because saying it would make it real in a way that required immediate action, and they needed to control the rate of action right now because the 45-minute window was running and everything needed to happen in the right order. "Where is Marcus Hartwell now?" Ronan said. "Church is working on it," Priest said. "He doesn't know yet." "Tell him to prioritize it," Ronan said. "And tell him to stop using county records. Use state databases. If Marcus Hartwell was a county commissioner, the county records are compromised," Griffin said. "Potentially?" "Yes," Ronan said. Priest went. Ronan looked at Griffin. "Go check on Maya," Ronan said. Not because checking on Maya was the most tactically urgent thing in this moment, but because Maya had been alone in the back bedroom for a while now, and the sound of adult urgency traveled through a house, and a child who had spent years calibrating herself to the specific frequencies of dangerous adult moods would be feeling the temperature of the house right now. Griffin went down the hall. The bedroom door was open. Maya was on the bed, actually on the bed now, not the floor, lying on her side with her back to the wall and the drawing pad pulled against her chest and her eyes open, watching the door. The sneakers were on the floor beside her, placed neatly, toe out. A child who slept with her shoes where she could reach them fast had learned to do that from something specific. She looked at Griffin when he appeared. "Something happened," she said. "Things are moving fast," he said. "That's good." It didn't sound good. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed frame, not close, not looming, at the foot of it, in her line of sight. "Your uncle knows you're here," he said. He was not going to lie to her about this. She was a child who had built her survival on accurate information, and she would feel a lie before he'd finished delivering it. "He's made some threats. They don't have teeth, but it's made things more complicated for the next hour. She held the drawing pad against her chest and looked at him. He called the police, she said. Something like that. He did it before, she said. When I ran the first time. I didn't get this far that time. She looked at the ceiling. I made it to the Kmart parking lot on Route 9. A woman found me and called the police, and they called him, and he came and got me. Griffin held very still. When was this? He said. 5 months ago, she said. 5 months. 5 months before she'd sat in a drainage culvert and watched a man eat a prepackaged sandwich and made a different plan. Did the officer who came to the Kmart? He started. It was the same one, she said. He always sends the same one. Something cold moved through Griffin's chest. He always sends the same one. She said it the way you said a thing you had already fully understood, had understood for months, had filed away as a fact of the world you were navigating. Not with bitterness. With the flat accuracy of a child who had stripped away the luxury of bitterness because bitterness took energy she needed for something else. He always sends the same one. This child had known about Breck before any of them. She had known, in the functional and practical way of someone who had been burned by a mechanism, that the mechanism was not neutral, that the official response to her situation was not a system failing to work. It was a system working as it had been arranged to work. She had known this at age 9 from personal experience. Griffin looked at her. Maya, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it as clearly as you can. She looked at him. Your uncle's brother, he said. Marcus. Do you know that name? Something moved in her face, not fear, something more complicated. The look of a name that carried weight. Uncle Marcus, she said. You know him. He comes to visit sometimes, she said. He doesn't live here. He lives somewhere else. But he visits. She paused. He visited a lot right after my mom died, when I first came to live with Uncle Dale. Another pause, longer. He stopped visiting about a year ago. Did something change a year ago? She was quiet. Her right hand moved to her left forearm. The automatic gesture, the same one she'd made at the kitchen table that morning when Griffin had first noticed her injury. Maya, he said very quietly. He's the one who told Dale, she said, about the Kmart. He's the one who made the call, not the officer. Uncle Marcus told Dale where I was, and Dale called Officer Breck. She looked at Griffin. I heard him on the phone. I was in the back of the car, and I heard him say Marcus's name. Griffin looked at the wall of the back bedroom in a safe house in Delwood, Texas. Plain plaster, a small water stain near the ceiling, a hook with nothing hanging from it. He looked at the wall and he assembled what he had. Marcus Hartwell, former county commissioner. His name on the original registration of a shell company that owned the building housing the Youth Athletics Association, Breck's residence, and a storage facility co-leased by his brother and Raymond Voss. A company that had been maintained for 11 years, rolling over quietly every 2 years. A man who had come to visit frequently in the months after a child entered his brother's home and had stopped visiting a year ago, approximately the time that the child had run to a Kmart and been returned. He saw it, not all of it, not the edges, but the shape at the center of it. He stood up. You're going somewhere, Maya said. I'm going to the next room, he said. You promised. I know. He looked at her. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Cass is in the house. She looked at him. She looked at the door. She made the calculation. 2 minutes, she said. He went to the kitchen. Cass was there. He looked at Cass and Cass looked at him, and he said, Back bedroom, stay in there with her. Cass put down the dish she was holding and went. Griffin went to the living room. Ronan was off the phone. He was standing at the window looking at the road, hands in his jacket, the same posture he'd had in the barn. Decker was on the couch. Priest had come back in and was standing near the door. Marcus Hartwell came to the house after Maya's mother died, Griffin said. He was present during the period Maya entered Dale's care. He's the one who coordinated her return after she ran the first time. He called Dale. Dale called Breck. He looked at Ronan. He's not a former participant. He's active. Ronan absorbed this without moving. Where is he? Decker said. Church is looking, Priest said. Griffin's phone buzzed. Church. He answered. Marcus Hartwell, Church said, has a residence registered in Tarrant County, but I also found a vehicle registration, current, with a Delwood address. A condo on the north side of town. Unit registered 14 months ago. 14 months. He moved back, Griffin said. Looks like it. Has he been in contact with Dale in the last 24 hours? Can't tell that from what I have, Church said. But there's one more thing. A pause. I found a name that keeps coming up adjacent to the shell company. A financial signature, SUG. Same legal office used for 3 of the company's filings, same notary. The name of the attorney is in the filings. Another pause. His name is Foster, regional firm Abilene, but he does a lot of work in 3 adjacent counties. The pause this time was different, weighted. He also appears in the records as the attorney of record for the Delwood Youth Athletics Association. Griffin looked at nothing. He represents the organization, Griffin said, and the company that owns its building, Church said. And he's filed papers in at least 2 child custody cases in this county in the past 4 years, both involving children who ended up with people connected to this network, Griffin said. I don't have confirmation of Church, Griffin said. Yeah, Church said. That's what it looks like. Griffin ended the call. He stood in the living room with the phone in his hand and looked at Ronan and said nothing for a moment because there were too many things to say, and the wrong one first would set the wrong tone, and the tone of the next 5 minutes mattered. It's a machine, Griffin said. Not 2 guys who know each other. An actual machine. It has property infrastructure and legal cover and a law enforcement contact, and it's been running for at least 11 years. Ronan said nothing. 3 children that Ellen knows about, Griffin said. 3 in this county. But Breck has multiple counties, Tran said. Which means, not just here, Ronan said. No, Griffin said. Not even close to just here. The living room was cold. The heat in the safe house was old and unreliable, and the afternoon was moving in with its own chill. Decker had his arms crossed and was looking at the floor. Priest was looking at Griffin. Ronan moved. He crossed the room and picked up his jacket from the chair and put it on. And he did this with a deliberateness that communicated that a decision had been made, that the period of gathering information had ended and been succeeded by something else. Tran needs everything we have, he said. All of it. Church's documents, Ellen's files, what Maya told you just now about Marcus, all of it. In the next 20 minutes. He looked at Griffin. And I'm calling the meet. Not this afternoon. Now. I want every member within 3 hours who can ride, and I want them here before dark. How many? Decker said. As many as come, Ronan said. Ronan, Griffin said. Ronan looked at him. The 45-minute window, Griffin said. Breck called it a law enforcement matter. If he comes to this property, he won't, Ronan said. Not with a state inquiry active and a state advocate's lawyer en route. He knows what that means. Coming to this property with a kidnapping claim and finding a state attorney on site and a documented inquiry in process. He looked at Griffin. He's not going to come here with a squad car. That's not his move. Then what is his move? Griffin said. Ronan looked at him steadily. I don't know, he said. Which was the most alarming thing Ronan Vale had said in the 14 hours Griffin had known him to be in this situation. The sound of it settled in the room. Then Priest's phone rang. He answered. He listened. His face did the thing it had done in the hallway, the contained alarm, the slight widening around the eyes. He lowered the phone. He looked at Griffin. Church, he said. He's been at the county clerk's office all morning. Records, property filings. He stopped. And, Griffin said, he found a name he wasn't looking for, Priest said. In a filing from 6 years ago. A corporate disclosure form attached to one of the shell company's rollover registrations. He looked at Ronan now, not Griffin. The name of a co-signer, a silent partner added to the company 6 years ago. Who? Ronan said. Priest looked at him. The name he said landed in the room like a physical object. Griffin heard it. He heard it and he felt the room reorganize around it. Felt the shape of everything they'd been building shift and accommodate this new element and produce a geometry that was entirely different from what it had been 30 seconds ago. Because the name Priest said was not a stranger's name. It was a name Griffin had known for 11 years, a name that had been in his phone, in his address book, in the category of people he considered to be, if not close, then trusted. The kind of trusted that came from shared history and mutual reputation and the specific faith that existed between men who had been in enough bad situations to know what the other one was made of. It was the name of a man who had ridden with the iron verdict for 8 years before moving to East Texas for work and transitioning to a support role. A man who had been present at chapter meetings, who had access to club communications, who knew the names of people like Church and Cass and Ellen Fraser, who had known, Griffin realized now, in the sick arithmetic of this moment, who would have known the routes that a man like Griffin Mercer typically rode, and the stops he typically made, and the stretch of Route 84, where a man who needed diesel after a sleepless night might pull into a gas station called the Last Mile. The name was Garrett Cole, and Griffin Mercer stood in the living room of the safe house and felt the architecture of the last 14 hours crack along a seam he hadn't known was there, and understood that Maya Hartwell had not found him by accident. Someone had put him in her path. Griffin said it out loud, and the words tasted like something burnt. "Someone put me there," he said, "at that gas station, on that road." Ronan looked at him without flinching. "We don't know that yet," Ronan said. "Garrett Cole knew my routes," Griffin said. "He knew the roads I ride when I can't sleep. He knew Last Mile. I stopped there with him twice in 19. He knew the timing." His voice was controlled, barely. "And his name is on the company." "His name is on a filing," Ronan said. "That's not the same as—" "Don't!" Griffin said. The word came out like something snapping, not loud. Louder would have been easier to absorb. It came out at the volume of absolute certainty, and Ronan stopped. The living room held the silence. Decker stood up from the couch slowly, the way large men stood when they were preparing for a room to change. "If Cole knew Griffin was going to be there," Priest said carefully, "then Maya approaching him wasn't random. Someone positioned her." "Or told her where to go," Decker said. "Gave her the note, told her what to write." Everyone looked at him. "No," Griffin said immediately. "Griffin, I've been with that child for 14 hours, Griffin said. "Nobody told her what to write. Nobody positioned her. The injuries are real. The fear is real. Everything she knows about that house, about Breck, about Marcus." He stopped. He breathed. "She's real." "Then what?" Priest said. "Cole put you there but didn't put her there?" Griffin looked at the floor. He worked it. Fast, because the 45-minute window was somewhere in its final minutes, and he didn't have the luxury of slow. Garrett Cole's name on a filing didn't mean he'd manufactured Maya's situation. Her situation had been built over 2 years. Her mother's death, Dale's custody, the bruising, the locked door, the failed 911 call. That was real. That existed independent of Griffin Mercer. But someone had known she was running. Someone had known she'd been circling that gas station. And someone had made sure Griffin was on Route 84 instead of Route 30, which was the road he usually took when he was riding east out of insomnia. 3 days ago, Garrett Cole had sent him a text. "Heard you're in the area. Road 84 east of Delwood is clear this time of year. Good riding." Griffin had thought nothing of it. He reached for his phone. He found the text. He showed it to Ronan. Ronan looked at it for a long time. "He routed you there," Ronan said. "Yeah," Griffin said. "Why?" Priest said. "If he's part of this, if he's protecting these people, why would he route you toward the girl?" The question sat in the room unanswered for 3 seconds. Then Griffin's phone rang. Garrett Cole. The room knew it from Griffin's face before he turned the screen around. Decker moved left. Priest moved right. Old positions, old instincts, the geometry of men preparing for information that could go multiple directions. Griffin answered. Speaker. "Garrett," he said. "Ghost." Cole's voice was tight, not the tight of aggression, the tight of someone operating under pressure from multiple directions simultaneously. "I know what you found." "Then you know how this conversation starts," Griffin said. "Listen to me." A breath. "I need you to listen to me right now. I know what my name looks like on that filing, but I need you to hear what it actually is. Talk, Griffin said. 6 years ago they came to me, Cole said. I didn't know what the company was. I was told it was a real estate holding group. Legitimate, passive investment. Sign here. You'll see a small return annually. I signed. His voice cracked slightly at the edges. I found out what it actually was 8 months ago. I found out what Dale and Voss were doing, what Breck was covering, what Marcus had built. The room was absolutely still. And, Griffin said, and I've been trying to figure out how to burn it down without... He stopped. Without getting killed. These aren't small people, Ghost. Marcus Hartwell still has contacts in 3 county governments. Foster, the lawyer, he has a judge in his pocket in the next county over. They have more reach than you're seeing right now. And if I walk into a sheriff's office or a state office with what I know, I'm the man whose name is on the company. So you sent me instead, Griffin said. Silence. I knew you'd find her, Cole said. I knew if you found her, you'd pull the thread. And I knew if the iron verdict pulled the thread instead of me, the thread would hold. His voice dropped. I knew you'd protect her in a way I couldn't. The controlled rage in Griffin's chest was a physical thing, a heat behind his sternum that pushed against the inside of his ribs. You used her, Griffin said. I used the situation, Cole said. She was already there. She was already running. You used a 9-year-old child as a mechanism, Griffin said. Quiet. Dangerous. Because you were scared. The silence from Cole's end was the silence of a man who could not argue with what he'd just been told. Where are you right now? Ronan said. That's why I'm calling, Cole said. Because it doesn't matter where I am in about 20 minutes. Breck knows his name is being searched in state databases. Church wasn't as quiet as he thought he was. Breck called Marcus an hour ago. His voice went tighter. Marcus is moving. He's not going to wait for a state inquiry to land. He's going to come for the girl before it becomes a matter of official record. He's coming here, Decker said. He's coming somewhere, Cole said. I don't know where you are, but if he can find out... How? Ronan said. Foster, Cole said. The lawyer. He has a contact at the state office. If Tran filed the emergency inquiry, Foster will know within the hour what property address is listed as the child's current location. Griffin looked at Ronan. Ronan was already moving. Decker, Ronan said. Get the bikes out of the barn. All of them, running, now. He looked at Priest. Get Cass and Ellen. Tell them we have 15 minutes. He looked at Griffin. Get Maya. Griffin was already down the hall. He came through the bedroom door and Maya was sitting upright on the bed, shoes on, backpack on her back, drawing pad inside it. She'd heard the tone of the house shift and had prepared without being told. We're leaving, Griffin said. I know, she said. He took her hand and they moved. The kitchen was controlled chaos. Cass pulling a bag from the closet, Ellen gathering her documents with practiced efficiency. The sound of engines starting in the barn reached them through the walls, the deep Harley thunder building from cold start rumble to operational, and the sound was the most clarifying thing Griffin had heard all day. Outside, the cold hit hard. Mid-afternoon and the sky had gone the color of old iron, low and pressing, the particular sky that preceded either rain or darkness, and possibly both. The barn doors were open, and Decker had 3 bikes running. Priest was on his, backing it out. Cass's truck was pulled to the barn entrance. Ronan was on his phone. Still moving, still directing, still the operational center of a situation that had accelerated past its original parameters. Griffin put Maya on his bike in front of him. She was small enough that she fit between his arms without obstruction. She held the handlebars for a moment, not controlling them, just holding something solid. And he felt her exhale slowly, deliberately, the breath of someone who had learned to manage their own fear, because no one else had managed it for them. You good? He said. Where are we going? She said. Somewhere they don't know about, he said. She nodded. They pulled out onto the county road and turned west, away from town, the bikes running together in a tight formation with Cass's truck between Decker and Priest. The cold air was immediate and total, the kind that found every gap in a jacket and committed to it. Griffin ran with one arm around Maya and one on the bar, and felt the road through the bike's frame the way he always felt it, as a direct language, vibration translated to information, the specific vocabulary of asphalt and speed. His phone buzzed in his jacket. He couldn't answer it at speed. He felt it buzz twice more and then stop. 4 miles west of the safe house, Ronan pulled them over at a truck stop large enough to be anonymous, and they gathered in the far corner of the lot away from the diesel lanes, engines idling, the bike's heat pushing back slightly against the cold. Ronan checked his phone. His face changed. "Church," he said. Marcus Hartwell's vehicle left the North Side condo 40 minutes ago. Church had someone watching the building. He looked at the group. "He's not heading to the safe house." "Then where?" Priest said. "Church is tracking the vehicle." Ronan looked at his phone. "It's heading west on 84. The same road they were on." Griffin looked at the truck stop entrance, at the road beyond it running west into the iron-colored afternoon. "He knows which way we went," Decker said. "Or he's guessing," Priest said. "He's not guessing," Griffin said. "He knows." He thought about Cole's voice on the phone. Foster has a contact at the state office. The emergency inquiry listed a county and a direction, if not a specific address. It was enough for a man who knew these roads. Ronan's phone again. He looked at it, his jaw set. "Cole," Ronan said. "He says Foster just called Breck. Breck is in a vehicle heading west." He looked up. "Not in a squad car. Not official, not a law enforcement response. A man in a personal vehicle heading west on Route 84 in the late afternoon, coordinating with another man doing the same. 2 men who had 11 years of infrastructure and 3 counties of reach, and a judge and a lawyer and a mechanism built for exactly this kind of closing of gaps. And a 9-year-old girl sitting on the front of a Harley in a truck stop parking lot, wearing a red jacket that was too small for her and a backpack with a butterfly keychain, holding the handlebars of a motorcycle that wasn't moving. Griffin looked at her. She was looking at the road. "Ghost," she said. "Yeah," he said. "How many of them are there?" He thought about what to say. He thought about the 11 years and the 3 counties and the judge and the lawyer and Breck and Marcus and Dale and Voss and a shell company that had been rolling over quietly every 2 years like something patient waiting for something specific. "Enough," he said. "How many of you?" she said. Ronan looked at Griffin. Griffin looked at the road. And then from the west, from the direction they'd been heading, from the direction of open highway and flat Texas plain and the last of the afternoon light bleeding out along the horizon, came a sound. Not 1 engine, not 2. A sound that built from nothing into something that you felt in your chest before you could count it. A low cumulative thunder rolling in from the west along Route 84, like the road itself was breathing, growing, becoming something more than a road. Headlights appeared at the horizon. Then more headlights. Then more. Ronan was looking at his phone. He was smiling, not the smile of relief or victory, the smile of a man who had made calls and was now seeing what those calls had produced. The specific smile of someone who had spent 20 years building something and was watching it function exactly as designed in exactly the moment it was needed. "The meat," Griffin said. "The meat," Ronan said. The headlights kept coming. 1 count, 2, 5, 12, 20. Too many to count from this distance, the sound of them building into something that vibrated the metal of the diesel lanes and moved through the asphalt and into the bikes and into Griffin's hands on the bars and into the small body sitting in front of him. Maya turned her head slightly. She looked at the approaching lights. She looked for a long time, and then she reached forward and put both hands on the handlebars again, not holding on this time, but holding steady. And Griffin felt her spine straighten against his chest, felt the moment her body went from brace to ready, felt the shift between a child enduring and a child deciding that enduring was over. And behind them, from the east, 2 sets of headlights appeared on Route 84, coming fast. Not motorcycles. Griffin looked at Ronan. Ronan had already seen them. The distance between the 2 approaching forces and the truck stop where the Iron Verdict sat idling was shrinking from both directions simultaneously, and in the narrowing space between them, in the cold October air above a Texas truck stop with iron clouds pressing low, Griffin Mercer looked at the road ahead and the road behind and felt everything compress into the specific clarity that came only when there was nothing left to calculate and only one thing left to do. The word finished itself in Griffin's chest before his mouth could form it. He looked at the two headlights coming from the east. He looked at the wall of headlights coming from the west. He looked at Maya's hands on the handlebars in front of him, steady, white-knuckled, ready. He made the only decision available. "Hold on," he said. He pulled the Harley forward into the lot's center lane, putting himself between Maya and the eastern road, and Ronan read it instantly and moved left, and Decker moved right, and the three bikes formed the same geometry they always formed without discussing it. The geometry of men who had stood between things and other things enough times that their bodies knew the shape before their minds announced it. The western headlights arrived first. 32 bikes. Griffin counted later, when counting was possible. In the moment, they were just mass and sound and the specific quality of presence that a large group of motorcycles produced when they arrived together with intention. Not chaos, not aggression, but weight. The undeniable physical weight of people who had decided to be somewhere. They filled the truck stop lot in under 90 seconds. Riders Griffin knew. Riders he didn't. Men and women in cuts from 4 chapters, some faces he recognized from years back, some entirely new. They parked in 2 loose arcs that enclosed the eastern entrance to the lot without touching it, without blocking it, without doing anything that could be described as threatening. Just present, just there, just the accumulated mass of people who had gotten a call and ridden. The 2 eastern headlights slowed, a silver sedan with mismatched panels. Behind it, a dark SUV. They stopped at the lot entrance. Griffin looked at them across 60 feet of cold asphalt. He couldn't see through the windshields from this distance in this light. He didn't need to. He knew who was in the sedan. He knew what they'd arrived expecting. A small group, manageable. A situation that could be renegotiated through pressure. They had driven west with the confidence of men who had been managing situations through pressure for 11 years and had never encountered a situation that didn't yield. They were encountering one now. The sedan sat at the lot entrance for 40 seconds. Then it pulled away. No confrontation. No words. The SUV followed. They turned back east on Route 84 and their taillights shrank and disappeared into the gray afternoon, and the truck stop lot breathed out around them. Not with relief, because relief was premature, but with the collective exhale of people who understood that a moment had passed, and what came next would be different in nature. Ronan was already on his phone. "Tran," he said. They moved. "Yes. I need you to tell me the inquiry is active and recorded, and there is nothing that can walk it back." A pause. "Good. And Foster?" "Yes. I have documentation. Church is sending it in the next 10 minutes. Everything. The filings, the registration chain, Cole's statement, the property records." Another pause. "Marcus Hartwell and Thomas Breck just attempted to intercept a child under active state welfare inquiry. That's on record now. There were 32 witnesses." He listened. "Yes. Do it." He ended the call. He looked at Griffin. "It's done," he said. Not victory. The word was too large and too clean for what this was. It was something smaller and more specific, the closing of a particular door. Marcus Hartwell and Thomas Breck had driven to a truck stop and found 32 motorcycles and driven away. And that departure had been observed and would be documented and added to everything else. And the weight of everything else had now reached the threshold where it produced consequences rather than investigations. Foster's license would be referred to the state bar within 48 hours. Breck would be suspended pending inquiry by end of week. Marcus Hartwell's name, attached to a shell company attached to a storage facility, attached to his brother and Raymond Voss, would arrive on a desk in Austin by morning, alongside the statement of a 9-year-old girl who had survived 2 years in his family's orbit and remembered everything. Dale Hartwell was arrested at his home at 6:40 that evening by 2 state investigators who had driven from Austin that afternoon. Voss was taken the following morning. The storage facility off Route 19 was searched within 24 hours, and what was found there? Documents, records, a ledger written in Marcus Hartwell's own hand, became the load-bearing evidence of a case that eventually extended across 4 counties and 14 years. Griffin learned these things in pieces, over days, the way you learn the aftermath of things. Not all at once, not cleanly, but in the fragmentary way that facts arrived when the emergency was over and the world returned to its ordinary pace. The night it ended, he sat in a diner outside Delwood at 2 a.m. with Maya across the booth from him and a cup of coffee going cold between his hands. Maya had hot chocolate. She'd asked for it with the specific carefulness of someone who wasn't certain asking for what they wanted was allowed, and the waitress had brought it with extra marshmallows without being asked, and Maya had looked at the marshmallows for a moment with an expression that crossed her face and was gone before it could be fully named. She was wearing a borrowed sweatshirt 3 sizes too large. Her backpack was on the seat beside her. The butterfly keychain caught the diner light. Ronan was in the corner booth on his phone, still managing the aftermath, his voice low and steady, the voice of a man who understood that the end of one phase was the beginning of another, and that the beginning of another required the same attention as everything that had preceded it. Cass was at the counter drinking coffee and talking to the waitress with the natural ease of a woman who talked to everyone. Ellen Fraser was in the parking lot on her own call, her voice occasionally audible through the glass, rising, purposeful, the voice of someone who had been waiting 8 months to be heard and was now being listened to and was not going to waste a syllable of it. Griffin looked at his coffee. Maya looked at her hot chocolate. "What happens to me now?" she said. He'd been waiting for the question. He'd been preparing for it for hours, turning it over, looking for the version of the answer that was honest without being brutal, that was real without being cold. "There's a process," he said. "It's not fast and it's not perfect. Tran's office is going to be involved. She's good. Ellen knows families in the area who've been vetted." He paused. "It's not going to be simple." Maya nodded. She looked at the marshmallows melting slowly into the hot chocolate. "Will you still be around?" she said. The question was asked at the marshmallows, not at him. The posture of a child who had learned to direct important questions at neutral objects so that the answer, whatever it was, didn't land directly on the face of the person hoping. Griffin looked at his hands around the coffee cup. He thought about Portland, about a text that said happy birthday with no punctuation, about 4 unanswered calls and the specific silence that lived in the space where his daughter's voice used to be. He thought about a man who had fled himself in expanding circles until he was on Route 84 at 4 a.m. "Yeah," he said. "I'll still be around." She looked up from the marshmallows. She looked at him the way she'd looked at him in the culvert, that full, undefended assessment, the look that took inventory of everything available and weighed it against everything previously experienced. She did this for a moment. Then she reached across the table and wrapped both hands around his coffee cup, not taking it, just holding the warmth of it, the same warmth he was holding on the other side of the ceramic. He didn't move his hands. They sat like that in the diner at 2 a.m, their hands around the same cup, while the coffee went cold and the marshmallows finished melting, and the diner light hummed its low fluorescent hum. Ronan finished his call and came to the booth and sat beside Griffin without asking. He ordered coffee. He looked at Maya. "You did good," he said. She looked at him. "I was scared the whole time," she said. "That's what doing good looks like," Ronan said. She considered this seriously, the way she considered everything, not dismissing it, not immediately accepting it, but actually weighing it. Then she went back to her hot chocolate. Ronan looked at Griffin. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. 22 years of knowing a man produced its own language, and what Ronan communicated in that look was something simple and direct. You held. Griffin received it the same way, not with sentiment, not with deflection, just receipt. The acknowledgement of something real between men who had stopped performing things for each other a long time ago. Outside, one by one, engines started. The riders who had come from the west were heading home, some of them hours away, riding through the Texas night in the cold with their headlights cutting the dark. Griffin could hear them departing from inside the diner, the sound of each engine diminishing as it pulled onto the highway, the lot thinning, the gathered mass becoming smaller and then individual and then gone. 32 people who had answered a call and ridden and stood in a parking lot and changed the outcome of something by being present, and who were now returning to their own lives and their own roads and their own versions of sleepless nights and early mornings. That was what it was. Not heroism, not spectacle, just people who had decided to show up, and were now going home. Decker put his head in the diner door. "Heading out," he said. He looked at Maya. He was not a man who was easy with children, had never pretended to be, but he looked at her with the specific directness of someone who wanted the look to communicate something that words would make smaller. He nodded once. She nodded back. He left. Priest appeared at the window briefly, raised a hand, gone. Cass came to the booth and sat in the space Decker had left and ordered pie and ate it methodically and didn't say anything for a long time, which was its own kind of presence. Ellen Fraser came in from the parking lot at 2:45. She sat at the counter and wrapped her hands around coffee and looked at the diner's back wall with the expression of someone who had been running so hard for so long that the sudden absence of the thing she'd been running against had left her in a space she hadn't prepared for. Not empty exactly, but newly quiet, the specific quiet of a room after the sound in it stops. Griffin watched her. He thought about 8 months of her shouting into walls. He thought about a filing cabinet relocked by someone who'd come through a back window. He thought about a reporter who'd been interested and a television station that had been interested, and all the interest that had produced nothing until 32 motorcycles arrived at a truck stop on Route 84 and the arithmetic changed. He would think about that for a long time. The arithmetic, what changed it and what didn't, and why presence sometimes mattered where paperwork hadn't. He didn't have a clean answer to it. He suspected there wasn't one. At 3:15, Maya fell asleep in the booth. She went the same way she'd gone at the safe house. Not suddenly, but gradually, the slow surrender of a body that had been running on its reserves for too long and had finally calculated that this was safe enough. Her head went to the booth's vinyl back. Her hands relaxed around the cup, which was empty. Her breathing deepened and evened, and she was gone, and the diner sounds continued around her. The hum of the refrigerator case, the low television in the corner, the distant sound of a truck on the highway. And none of it touched her. Griffin looked at her sleeping. He thought about Ellie. He took out his phone. He held it for a moment. 3:17 in the morning. Portland was on Pacific time, 2 hours behind, just past 1 a.m. there. She was asleep. She had work in the morning, probably, or whatever she did now that he didn't fully know the details of, because he hadn't been close enough for long enough to know the current details of his own daughter's life. He typed a text. "I know it's late. I know I don't have standing to ask for anything, but I want to try again if you'll let me. Take whatever time you need. I'll be here." He sent it. He put the phone face down on the table. He looked at the window, at the dark parking lot, at the highway beyond it, where the last of the headlights from departing bikes were gone now, and Route 84 was just a road again. Just asphalt and yellow lines and the flat Texas dark, ordinary, unremarkable. The same road it had been yesterday and would be tomorrow. Ronan drank his coffee. "You good?" he said. Griffin looked at Maya sleeping in the booth. He looked at the phone face down on the table. He looked at the window and the road and the dark. "Getting there," he said. Ronan nodded. They sat in the diner until the sky began to lighten. Not dawn yet, but its precursor, the first gray suggestion of morning arriving from the east, that slow and uncommitted lightning that didn't promise anything but came anyway. The way morning always came regardless of what the night had been. Cass drove Maya to a placement arranged by Tran's office that afternoon. Griffin rode alongside the truck for 40 miles before he turned north. He didn't make a ceremony of it. He pulled up beside the passenger window, and Maya looked at him through the glass, and he held up one hand. Just the one hand. Flat. The way you held up a hand when words were both necessary and insufficient. She held up hers. Then he turned north and she went south, and the distance between them became miles and then more miles, and he rode into the October morning with the cold in his face and the engine's voice under him and the weight of the last 48 hours in his chest. Not heavy, the way old weight was heavy, but present the way real things were present. The weight of something that had happened and mattered and changed the shape of what came after. 3 weeks later, Tran's office formally expanded the investigation into 3 additional counties. 6 weeks later, Marcus Hartwell was indicted. 8 weeks later, Griffin's phone lit up with a Portland area code. He pulled over on the shoulder of whatever road he was on. He looked at the screen. He breathed once, slow, through his nose. He answered. "Ellie," he said. A pause. Then, "Dad." The word. Just the word. And whatever its temperature was, whatever its weight, whatever it carried inside it, he received it. He didn't qualify it or explain himself or try to compress 2 years of distance into the first 30 seconds. He just received it the way you received something you'd been waiting for long enough to understand that the receiving was the whole thing. Miles away, in a placement that finally had a window without cardboard and a door without a lock, a girl in a red jacket that actually fit sat at a kitchen table and drew a picture of 32 motorcycles on a highway at dusk, headlights blazing, riding toward something that needed them. She drew them carefully. She got the proportions right. She was very good at looking at things until she understood them. And outside the window, the Texas sky went on forever in every direction, cold and wide and indifferent and vast. And somehow, in all that vastness, not empty. Not anymore. End.